in a world where trauma is real, where people seek out distraction from their internal lives and relationships with others, and where no one is taught healthy self-care. Help was needed. In 2019, the mission began. Find a way to help people understand and better their mental health. Seek out ways to explore relationships and how they work. Fight against the stigmas that surround counseling and therapy. And, most importantly,
do all of that so you don't have to be a therapist to understand it. Hey everybody. Welcome to Season 2 of Therapist Theater. I'm your host, Josh Treese. I'm a practicing therapist in Music City, USA, and every week a guest therapist, counselor, or social worker joins me here in the theater to talk about a movie that we've seen and what relationships or mental health issues it highlights. Today's guest is Missy Prusinski. Missy is a therapist and hypno-therapist here in Nashville. She specializes in working with trauma and addiction and obsessive patterns and works from a family systems perspective. Thanks so much for downloading today's show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And while you're doing that, help other people find the show by giving it a 5-star rating and writing a review for it in the podcast app. Mac, they said you escaped. I knew you wouldn't leave without me. I was waiting for you. Now we can make it, Mac. Now we can dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Hi, Missy. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Josh. Thank you for asking me to come.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you on today. I like to start every conversation with my guests by asking, why therapy? Why do you do what you do?
Well, that is, I'm a person who just does the next easy thing. So really, therapy was a long journey where so I grew up, I was in with a child therapist, psychologist since I was 5. I always had behavioral issues. So I was very comfortable going to therapy. I kind of always thought it didn't work because my behaviors didn't get any better. But I mean, this was the 80s. I don't know what they were doing. And then the only thing in high school I got good grades in was English and psychology. So I did AP psychology. I went to college and my counselor in high school said, well, if you sign up for psychology, you can get out of Psych 101 because you passed your AP psychology test. So I just thought, all right, that'll be my major. And so I just did that. And then the whole time I thought, therapy is a joke. Nothing's changed. And, the film I picked, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I watched that since before I can remember. And I always thought, I just didn't think that therapy worked. I just thought you had to find a different way. But I did good in psychology. I also, in my undergrad, did a separate major for criminal justice. I was really interested in being like a criminologist. I thought it'd be fun to be a professor of criminology. So I did that too. I did both of them. And, I always loved movies. And then I graduated college and I just, got jobs. I had a job in music PR and I was doing that and I wasn't that interested in it. And everyone I worked with was like so passionate about being music publicists. And I just didn't care that much. It was just a job to me. So then I was living in Los Angeles then, and Pepperdine was a school in Los Angeles. And I just saw somewhere that, I don't know where I would have seen it, that they had a master's program in clinical psychology. And I thought, you know what, I'll just apply. That sounds fun. I'll just apply. And if I get in, and I'll get to do that. And I didn't really have any big plans. So I applied, I got in. And so I quit the music PR job and I just went into that. And then doing that, it was often, we're training you to be therapists. You are going to be a therapist. And I thought, oh man, I don't want to do that. And then I was like, you have to do a practicum. And so I did that at uh, an IOP for like, they call it, I guess, the chronically mentally ill. I don't know if that's like the right term to say, but it's people who lived in halfway houses and then they would come in for an intensive outpatient and they had, paranoid schizophrenia and it was just, maintaining on medications and there wasn't much change, and I wanted quicker change. I wanted to be like solution focused change. And we led groups and I got to have individual clients. And then I started saying, well, let me do some family therapy. I'm really interested in the systems perspective. Can we please bring in family? So they let me bring in family members. And then I would see changes in the whole family system. And that really excited me. And I thought, okay, I could actually do this because I don't really know what else I would do. And I didn't really get tied into the therapy community in Los Angeles at that time either. I was about 26 and I just didn't really get tied in. And then I graduated school, couldn't find a job doing anything. I really wanted to do something with family therapy and I just couldn't find that within Los Angeles. And I thought, I don't want to go work for an agency, which you need to do to get your hours. So I went and traveled around Southeast Asia for a while. I don't know what I was doing. I thought I could get a job there somehow. I don't know how, but I didn't do that. And then I don't know what I was thinking. And then I ended up just started applying to jobs. And I saw Cumberland Heights. I'd never been to Nashville, Tennessee. And I saw they were hiring for a family counselor. And I thought, this is the job I want. My resume had nothing on it. It like basically had my name and address. I mean, it had nothing. And it was like half a page. I didn't even know how to make a resume really. And I talked on the phone I think I was in Laos and I talked on the phone and they hired me and I flew and just started the job. I said, I obviously can't afford to buy a plane ticket to come out for an interview. And then, so they hired me over the phone and that's how I moved here. And then doing that, the salary wasn't that great, working at a treatment center, but I loved the work. And my supervisor there said, you can do a private practice part-time. So I did that to supplement. And then after my son was born in 2016, I just went full-time private practice, which I love. So it was a weird walk on why I did therapy. It was very slow going. And I always thought, I don't like people. I'm not empathetic. Like that's not going to be good at this. But you know what really makes me good, because I work with an addiction too, is because I really like theory. I really like stories. So I am a little more clinical with people. I'm a little more challenging. I don't get too codependent with my clients, which some therapists do, which I think makes me a good therapist, especially for certain people. So, and then I just love hearing the stories. I'm just so honored to hear people's stories, that they trust them with me, and just watching their journey. I just love seeing people's journey. And I secretly love when people make wild decisions. And I just think it's so interesting to hear, because I think either way, it's all going to work out on, if you're the hero in your journey, it's all going to work out in the end. I don't get too caught up with, what they're doing is so unhealthy, or this is going to be unhelpful. I'm like, okay, you had another relapse. Now what? And what's the next step? I don't get too caught up in it. So that's my why therapy. And now I think it's great. I think I'm really into like the changes that are happening into mental health. And another thing that happened is talk therapy, that I realized we need to do more than just talk therapy. We need to go do something experiential. People need to have an experience to make the changes they want. So I got really into hypnotherapy for trauma, hypnotherapy for changing obsessions, sand tray therapy. Any experiential therapy I think is great. So that too, because that was a big wake up call, because my whole childhood I basically just did talk therapy.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think I think your story, as well as what you just said, brings up an interesting point. I had a friend that I used to work with in my job just while I was in grad school, who called me up one day and asked me to go to coffee because he was thinking about going to school to be a therapist as well. Mm-hmm. But he was nervous and scared because he had just gotten, not just, but for a while, he'd been into this specific type of yoga. And I can't remember what it's called, but basically it's more than just the movements. It was kind of a philosophy, if you will, and he was
Okay.
really worried that he would have to kind of compartmentalize that away
Mm-hmm.
from something he could use with clients. And I said to him, "Oh no, I think one of my favorite things about therapy is that, you know, I as a therapist could have sat next to somebody in grad school in every single class. We could have done our
Yeah.
internships at the same place and become completely different therapists
Yep.
because of who we are as people.
Yeah.
Like, you integrate who you are as a person
Mm-hmm.
into how you practice. Now, that's not to say you seek to reproduce yourself in a client, because
Yeah.
that's not the end goal.
Yeah.
But your personality is welcome in the room. And he was like, "Oh my gosh!" And it sounds like your journey, your life, your story
Mm-hmm.
has really kind of shaped who you are as a therapist as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. That's
Um,
true.
I'm so curious. I'd love to ask you about the hypnotherapy, because it's not something that's come up before on the
Oh,
show.
really? Okay.
And I don't have much experience learning about it or participating in it myself.
Yeah.
I mean, can you tell me just a little bit about it?
Yeah. So it's basically like going into a deep meditative state, like you're into the theta brain waves. And so I pretty much do it with all of my clients. I mean, the ones that are open to it. And some people just come to me just for hypnotherapy and then they go back to their other therapist. You know, they'll just come to me for those sessions. But I have like a nice recliner and I explain everything to them, and how it looks is, whatever, there's various ways to do it, whatever they want to work on. So like smoking is very easy. As long as someone wants to quit smoking, that's a very easy behavior to extinguish. And we set up a script where we have to put in, I have to, during the script, I find out if they really want to change their behaviors. And we put in new behaviors. They talk about what new behaviors they would do. So like if they're driving in the car, instead of smoking, they're going to drink water. And, we make a whole script. Then when they lay in the chair, I lead them through some breathing exercises. We do a progressive relaxation through their body. I do a deepening exercise where, they'll walk down steps, or I'll take them through nature and we'll walk somewhere. And then I just say, let your mind wander. And we go through all of the changes they want to make. I also have scripts that I'm giving at like trainings, like canned scripts, I call them. And I put one of those in too. And I watch their eyes to make sure that they're in the theta brainwaves. And if they're not, then I do more deepening. But most people are right
Hmm.
away. I have very creative clients. So that's one way to do it. Another way is doing exploratory hypnosis, which is really fun. So if someone, and that you often have to do with like food issues or um, codependent relationship type things. And so we go back and say, where did this start? And when they're talking to me with everything going through their prefrontal cortex, they can usually say, oh, it was this very specific abandonment. My father left at this time. This was it. But then when they're in hypnosis and it's going through their theta brainwaves, it'll be like, nope, it was when I was kicked out of a group in middle school. That's the real thing that I really need to work on some forgiveness. And so we do some inner child work when they're in hypnosis, and it works great. It really sticks, in forgiveness
Huh.
for themselves and anyone else they need to forgive. And then I have some people who just will come in and they'll say, hey, I just want to do hypnosis today. Don't know. I don't ask what's going on in their life. Nothing. Like sometimes I like to know what's going on in people's lives, but we just go to hypnosis and just, I'll say, where are you now? And it's just, they'll say, I'm a bear over here. I'm like, one person was like, I'm a horse outside um, the window when I was a little boy and my parents are inside. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And the horse wants to jump through and break the window. And so you just go these really strange, creative places.
Huh.
And then sometimes at the end of session, I'll think, man, what was that? And I'll say, let me know any changes, anything this next week. And most times people have something positive, or they'll have some dreams from it, and they'll have some awareness of something. So I was trained in EMDR, but with EMDR, and I did that in 2012, 2013, I was getting too nervous with the protocol. I felt like I had to follow this protocol, and if I messed
Mm-hmm.
up, that I was going to screw them up or something. And I was in supervision, and I was just like, sometimes I would just get stuck in the protocol, and I was looking at my, you have like a page of notes of what you're supposed to follow, and I would be like,
Mm-hmm.
where do I go? But with hypnosis, you can just be more intuitive. You just have a
Yeah.
feeling, and you just feel this strange connection between you and the client, and it just goes, it goes where it's supposed to go. And so
Yeah.
it shocks me. And the one that it really works for is when people um, have a relationship that they break up with and they can't let go of the person they broke up with. For some reason,
Hmm.
hypnosis works great with that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I've had amazing results with, and I don't know why it works so well. But
Like
they'll
maybe it helps them to understand the attachment or dependency a little more
yeah, mm-hmm.
to the point where maybe they can, I don't know, reconcile why they're holding on so tight and let it go.
Yeah, and then also build up their own like their inner core, their
Yeah, resilience.
their
Yeah.
inner anchor. They can anchor themselves with hypnosis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that you don't pull out a pocket watch on a chain.
No,
You
nope,
don't have a spinning disc with a spiral on it.
nope, nope.
Yeah. Do you have a sweet cane where like the head of it, the top pops off and like or the eyes maybe? No, that's Jafar. That's
That's
uh
yep.
Well, I mean, I think that's really so as you were speaking, it started to remind me of EMDR and brain spotting. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that you brought those up. It sounds like it is a way of helping somebody kind of click into a different mode in their
Yeah,
brain to
yeah.
process on a different level.
Mm-hmm. And
You
now
know,
I
and oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say I think that I talk on the show all the time about preconceptions that people have about therapy in
Mm-hmm.
general and how oftentimes it comes from pop culture. So I mean, I got
Yep.
to admit, hypnosis, my only understanding of it comes from cartoons and movies
Yeah.
and things of that nature. And I did have one of my best friends, one of my groomsmen, probably 10 years ago, he was taking a course on how to help people quit smoking via hypnosis. I don't know if
Yeah.
anything ever came out of it,
Mm-hmm.
but even then he couldn't really explain what he was learning to me. So
Yeah.
it to hear you talk about it, it doesn't sound like a mystical, magical, you know,
No,
uh,
it's not. And
trick that you pull on people.
yeah, and you know what? It's funny. So that you come in for one session to set up the script for him for smoking cessation, and then the next session a week later, they're supposed to come in for the actual hypnosis. I've had so many people just from setting up the script. They call me within the week and said, "Oh, I've been not smoking for 3 days. Just setting up that script was enough." So it's
Hmm.
just thinking like, what would you do instead? What and with
Yeah.
obsessions, what are you going to do with all that brain space? What are you
Yeah.
avoiding? What do you need to focus on? So it's just putting something else in there. So
Yeah, and that's another thing is I think it's really interesting, and I think both of us working with addictions, we talk with clients about negative recovery and positive recovery. Negative recovery, of course, being whatever's bringing the client in. I drink
mhm.
too much, or I do a lot of drugs, whatever. Well, obviously, we got to get that stuff out. We got to stop
Yeah,
doing that stuff because you're saying that it's hurting you. That's the
yeah,
negative recovery side. The positive recovery side is what do we add into your life that
yeah,
helps Missy be more Missy or helps Josh be more Josh.
yep,
Practically, what that is recognizing that the harmful behavior was a coping strategy that was effective. It was
yeah,
effective for a while, but now you're telling me it's not. So we need to build in other coping strategies because if you take away the thing that's helped you stay alive, you
mhm,
need other stuff to help you stay alive. So to
yeah,
hear you say, like, yeah, we build these scripts where we build in behaviors to
mhm,
take the place of the behaviors that they're trying to stop, that makes
mhm.
a lot of sense.
And so another thing is too, sometimes people who have been doing, using drugs for so long, they're like, I don't know, or drink, they're like, all I do is drink. I don't know. Nothing sounds fun to me. I don't want to go do yoga. I don't want to go running. I don't know. They're like, I don't want to do anything, and I want to drink. And so that's why hypnosis is great too, because you can go on this journey, and then they can ask their inner wisdom, or it'll be like, you find a box and you open it. What is the word inside? And it'll be like honesty, and I'll be like, okay, you need honesty. What do you need to get honesty? And so you can go on. They can go on more of a journey when they're not so guarded. But for trauma, really do like hypnosis for like long term trauma starting from childhood, but if someone had like one main specific event, and for some certain people, I do refer them out for EMDR. I think it's better for them to know the safety of like what to expect next.
Yeah.
So for some people, I think EMDR is definitely better. So
Yeah,
it
it's
just
very,
depends.
very structured.
And for some people, that's very safe for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of know my clients before I decide if we're going to do hypnosis or if I would refer them out for EMDR.
Yeah. I'm so curious, just based upon, I guess, your background and then kind of the ways that you've talked about using hypnosis. Do you use narrative therapy at all?
Yes, I do use. Yes, I do use narrative therapy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, like, and I would love to do. Actually, I would love to start a narrative therapy group within the community to work through
Oh,
trauma.
yeah. So I don't ever I want to assume that people, I guess, know what we're talking about when we use therapy
Oh,
words. But like, could you give me like a sentence or two on what narrative therapy is?
yeah. So for how I think of narrative therapy is having the clients write their own story and own their own story. And I do that in multiple ways. I mean, they can write it out and bring it in, share with me what they wrote. But also, I think using the sand tray too allows clients to work through their own story. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
how do you use narrative therapy?
I mean, I think the thing about it that I use the most is externalizing issues.
Okay, yeah, oh yeah,
I mean, I think that is something I do in almost every session
mm-hmm,
because so much of the work I do is centered on shame
mm-hmm.
that I feel like if you can get that shame out of somebody's body and put it in front of them, that
Yeah,
enables them to do some work with it rather than integrating it into their identity.
yes, okay,
Um, it's like being inside of the bottle. You can't see the label. Like you got to be able to get it out in front of somebody. But I
mm-hmm.
think also helping somebody to shift from an external locus of control to an internal locus to realize, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you could literally kind of zoom out of your body and view yourself as a character in a story and you're the author of that story,
Mm-hmm.
you get to decide what do you think that character does next? Why do they
Yeah,
do that? And how do they get there? And all of a sudden I think it's like a perspective shift. It has like
yeah.
shifted them into realizing, oh my gosh, life doesn't have to suck and I have some say over it.
Yeah. So the externalizing, see, I would always think of that as like parts work, like what part of you, I always think of that, but then
Mm-hmm.
I would utilize that within narrative therapy. But yeah, narrative therapy, I'll use different like techniques. Like if they're upset with someone, I'll say, why don't you write a letter to yourself from your coworker? Your coworker is writing it to you. You're mad at your coworker. What would they be saying to you to like help them with people with empathy from what the other
Oh,
person's
that's
thinking?
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll use different like journaling or writing techniques that I've picked up over the years. And then I just call
Mm.
that narrative therapy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit different, but I think it's also like there's overlap in that Venn diagram because I do think that uses so many of the techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I'd love to kind of shift into briefly, and we may talk about it more later, though, is that you, unlike any other guest
Yeah.
I've ever had on the show, are a filmmaker.
Yes. Yes. Um, yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that.
Which means
You
I think that makes you the most uniquely qualified person to be on this podcast
Yeah. Cool.
that's ever been on. Yes, please tell me about that.
So yeah, I mean, sort of like your story, I always wanted to be a filmmaker, but I grew up in Flint, Michigan. I didn't feel like I had that many opportunities there. I lived in Los Angeles and I used to do costumes for films, but like high budget, like D movies, and there was no creativity and I had no control. And so I was like, I just don't want to do films if this is what it's like.
Hmm.
So that just was not a possibility in my head. Um, and then after I had my son in 2016, I almost died, or I went into cardiac arrest and they had to wake
Oh
me
my
up. And
gosh.
it was a crazy long recovery. I spent a week in the intensive care unit and, it was just the craziest thing that could happen if you're giving childbirth and you still live through it. And I was just thinking during that recovery, I'm always wanting my clients to do something creative. I'm always having them get in touch with their authenticity. I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. Like, what do I have to lose? I have nothing, I have nothing to lose. Just try. And I always would write. And so I took a story I wrote and I went to a short film writing class and I wrote it, and it's called Queer and Southern God. And then and this was back in 2017, I think, when we first filmed it. And I just got people together and we filmed it. We edited it, put it together, got music, and I was the director and the writer, and sent it out to film festivals. And now it's in development to be a series, and so that's exciting. Yes, it's exciting. With so there's some interest with some people who live out in LA, and I'm working with a producer now I made a co-creator of it, and we're putting it out to 8 episodes. So hopefully within the next year or two, anyone would see Queer and Southern God out on one of the major outlets. Like,
wow.
Yeah. So it's that's been a fun journey. And after that, then just I've met other filmmakers in the community, and I've made some other films. I made one about a suicidal therapist, and they're all shorts because films are expensive to make, and I'm just self-funding these, or the people I'm with. And so I made one about that. And but everyone I do has something to do with what's going on in the world, social justice. And I've produced a few films, but for me, I really like being a director. That would be my end goal, to be a director or being a writer. So that's my hobby, which is so funny because it's like really stressful too. So I don't know why, but the energy you feel around it's just, you kind of go into an exciting mania. Like, I go in my basement and write because I have 2 kids now. I'll put them to bed. I'll go down there at 8 and I look up, it's 2 a.m. It's just, you get lost, and it's just so great that there's just something I found that I can get lost in it. Or when you're in the middle of planning the film or afterwards, I just can get lost in the, running around, getting locations. And
you get into that flow state where time passes differently.
Normally. Yeah, I love the flow of it and everything. So and just then little opportunities arise, and then it also really gets me in touch with I don't know, like my intuition too. Like I'm always, because you're like, okay, this is getting too much, so I just quit this. And I'll always say, send me a sign if I should quit this or not. And something always comes through positive, and then I just keep pushing through with the project. So
well, I think I'm curious, like when you're writing, which maybe this is an assumption, but is that where like the genesis of the idea, where everything kind of starts, is like the writing of the script?
Yep. That's where it starts, is the writing.
Yeah. So how do you know what it is you're going to write about? Is it that you are processing something in your life and then it begins to make its way onto the page, or?
Yes. And the thing is, so I'm just not good at, I always want to try to write memoir type stuff, and I'm not good at that. I go into these strange characters. And so like, the Queer and Southern God character, it's came up in a memoir writing class about, a female to male transgender individual who ends up getting raped by their best friend, and they end up not getting an abortion because of their Christian guilt, and carrying the baby, and then adopting the baby to their rapist's mother. And this was all sort of written in this memoir class where everyone's writing about their memoirs for 8 weeks. And this whole story came out, and it obviously wasn't a memoir. And I thought, well, this will never see any light of day. This is interesting, but I just shouldn't see any light of day. And then some, I'm part of the queer community, and some other people that were transgender individuals were like, yeah, make that into a short. We can do this. We can all do this together. So
wow.
That's what came out with it. And then the series is a little different. It comes out, there's the way that it's getting developed is the main character, Hank, doesn't know who the person is who raped them, and they find out towards the end of the series. So
oh my gosh, you just hooked me in. Now I want to see it.
I know, yeah. So it's and all the time, like another time I went, another short I want to do is about, I was like, you got to write about, I was going to write about the difficulty I was having relating to my 4-year-old son as a mother. I went to write about that. And what came out was the short story that almost seems like a poem, which I'd love to make into a film if I ever had money, about the 1950s New Mexico. One woman is married to a guy who owns a dairy farm, and she cheats on him with another woman. And that's what came out when I meant to be writing about me and my son. So it's just, and nothing ever comes out that I expect it to come out, you know?
Yeah.
My mind won't do memoir. It just goes into these weird characters.
Well, let me ask you this. So, I mean, I think I'm understanding that both Queer and Southern God and this other idea for a story you have are fiction.
Yes, everything's fiction, yeah.
Do you feel like that in writing fiction that you as the author are connecting with something inside of you?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, some
So
part.
so even though it's fiction, it's almost is it like a way of working something out, even if it's, because I know we have dreams at night,
Yeah.
and a lot of time our dreams are our brain's way of kind of categorizing and sorting and organizing information. It's like
Yes.
defragging a hard drive. So is it something like that? Is it just kind of
Yes.
allowing you to think about something different? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think it is a cathartic process, just like a dream. I think it is just like a dream working through something, and I'm not always aware what that something is, but then it feels more relaxed, calmer, I guess, at the end of it.
Yeah. I was one of my favorite podcasts ever to listen to is Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History.
Okay.
And he did an episode on a Randy Newman song, maybe an album, but a lot of his songs, Gladwell said, are told from the perspective of fictional characters. And this is music from like the 60s, so it's a lot different than today. But what Newman did through that was it allowed him to work out and talk about ideas that he felt like he couldn't do from his own voice.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you think that there's a seed of that in there?
Oh yeah, I do. I definitely think so. Yeah. I don't know how to expound on that, but I definitely think that's exactly what it is. Just taking on the hats of different characters.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Is your movie Queer and Southern God, is that anywhere that people can see it right now?
Yeah,
Online anywhere?
It's on Vimeo. If you just Google Queer and Southern God, you can see the full film. It's like 23 minutes. There's a little trailer for it. There's some other little films I did. So, yeah.
I love it. Well, let's shift from talking about that movie to talking about another movie.
Yeah.
What movie did you bring for us to talk about today?
I brought One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. So, this is a movie that I think is ingrained in pop culture.
Yes.
I mean, because I have, until I was preparing to talk to you today about this movie, I'd never seen it.
Oh, you hadn't?
No,
Wow.
which I feel, I mean, even saying that, I feel some shame over because it is regularly talked about in certainly the 100 greatest movies of all time.
Yeah. Did you like it?
I did. I really liked it. And
I rewatched it too, and I thought it was so much more brilliant than I remembered. Because really, the last time I would have saw it was 5th grade or something. So, and maybe I saw pieces of it on TBS late at night.
You saw this in 5th grade?
Oh yeah, we had this at my house on like, I think even beta tape, maybe VHS. Well, I watched this movie from before I can even remember, and there's so many jokes or so many things that I was like, with Randall watching this the second time, I was like, I missed so much of these sexual innuendos. I didn't get them at all when I was younger.
Yeah. Well, it's something it's a movie that I've known about my whole life that I had never seen. And so in watching it to prepare for this, I kind of existed in this weird space of being familiar with something that I'd never engaged with.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think on top of that, it is a movie that I feel like a person might have a different experience watching if they became a therapist pre-training and post-training.
Yeah.
But and then on top of that, my wife was like, "Oh, you're going to watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "I hated it when I saw it last time." And I was like, "Okay." And I've talked about an experience that I have on the show. I think I've had it a few times where I'll watch a movie and I hate it or I am indifferent to it. And then I have the interview with the guest and I walk out of the interview loving it. Like
Yeah.
saying like, I got to buy that movie, because when you talk to somebody who really connects with something and is passionate about it, it's tough for you to not feel the same way.
Yeah.
And so
Why
I
did-
had that expectation going in that I wasn't going to like it, but then
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. Why didn't your wife like it, or didn't she tell you?
Well, so we talked about it after I watched it, because I watched it this morning when I got up. And I think for her, I think what she said was that now she watched it when she was in her undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
that it felt very heady and it felt very hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
said, oh, that's so interesting, because I felt the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I felt like it was full of heart and that it did have hope,
Yeah.
a lot of hope, almost like an inciting hope.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Inciting.
Yeah. So tell me why you picked this movie. What was it that attracted you to it?
Well, I mean, that was the first thought that came up when you reached out to me to be on this podcast, because I just think of psychology in that movie. You know, I just thought of it, and that was the first one I thought of. And then I just think it's so. I like how they say, you know, therapy is a microcosm of what's going on in the world, and that movie still to this day holds up about, you know, how strong the institutions and our expectations are, not just within the mental health field, but like the whole world and civilization and how we live. And I just think it's really interesting that the person who's in charge, like in this movie, Nurse Ratched, who is always thought of as a villain, but in this one, watching it this time, I didn't think of her so much as a villain. I thought, oh, she's just been programmed by this institution, and that she's supposed to be the therapist. And then this outsider, Randall, comes in, and really he's the real therapist having therapeutic moments. And
Oh, yeah.
and he goes up, one person can go up against the system. And I just think it's interesting at the end, the system's the institution, or the combine, as if you read the book, the chief calls it in the book is the combine, is that kills him in the end. But still, with him doing that, he planted a bunch of little seeds, and other people got free. So it's like,
Yeah.
he was almost like a sacrifice for the bigger cause, I guess. So I just think it's so interesting that even today, like, therapy looks a lot the same as it did back then. When that was, I know the book was written in 1963, I think, 62 or 63. And, you know, I just think that's interesting. But
I didn't know that it was a Broadway show before it was a movie.
Yep. Yeah. I knew. Yeah.
So I mean, I have a lot. I have so many questions and thoughts about this, because I was so surprised at how much I loved it. First off, Danny DeVito with a full head of hair.
Yes. So young, so cute.
Who is not acting. I think at some point, and I don't know when it was, clearly after this, Danny DeVito stopped playing characters, but he started playing Danny DeVito as that character.
Yes.
And maybe that started with Taxi. I don't really know. But in this movie, he is not Danny DeVito. He's Martini. He's just this gentle, cute little guy who's timid. And I was just, shocked and impressed by that. The movie one, it's only the third, I think. It's not third in order, the second out of 3 movies that have done this, but won all top 5 Oscars.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. I think best supporting actor and actress and best director. No, best picture. It got picture, it got director, it got actor, it got actress, and I don't know what the other one would have been.
Yeah, the director did an amazing job. All of the acting, I just noticed watching it yesterday, is amazing. Everyone does so great. Everyone's so into their character and so subtle in certain ways.
Yeah. Here's something that I thought, earlier I mentioned how this kind of took the place of the oldest movie we've covered from Network. On the episode about Network, I just did not connect with that movie at all.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't. And I was trying to wrestle with, is it because movies from the 70s are completely stylistically different than movies today? I mean, really movies in any other era. But like they were not afraid of taking a stroll. Like you didn't have this pressure, I think, that movies today face where every moment on screen something has to be happening.
Yes.
So a lot of movies back then, you had these scenes where there were these long conversations that the people were stationary in one location. Or we also did a show on, Terms of Endearment.
Okay.
And Terms of Endearment was a movie, once again from the, that's 80s, that I watched and I thought, I couldn't tell you what the central conflict of this movie was, but what it felt like was that they created these 4 to 6 characters very clearly and then put them in a sandbox and let them play, and whatever came out, came out.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And I feel like with this movie, though, I cared about every character. I could tell you things about every character, even if it's just, well, that guy is probably this because he behaves this way.
Yeah.
So they just kind of like sketched out the characters in such a clear way that it allowed me to identify and empathize with every single one of them. And I think that just felt so different than a lot of movies that I've seen lately.
Yes, yes. I agree with you. I agree. I like the dialogue, the older movies where there's more dialogue and space to think.
But I think that sometimes the danger in that, while I do like it, that sometimes the danger in it is it feels meandering, or it's easy during those times. And I don't know if this is because my brain has been conditioned by movies from the current era. It feels like at times I can get lost in those meandering kind of things where like all of a sudden it's like, wait, what are we doing? What are we
Yeah, I think it's your brain's conditioned to the newer movies. I feel like it might be that. Yeah.
Could be.
Because everything in a movie is put in there for like a point. There's a reason it's in there. But with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, did you ever get bored or your mind wandered?
Never.
I felt like
Nope. Never.
I felt like everything had such. I thought it was so great with the building blocks, like because I had already seen the movie before, but then I noticed this time I'm like, oh, when they're doing this is the when he tries to pull the fountain off, I was like, I forgot that he had tried to do that, and he was like, at least I tried. I was like, that is such a great therapeutic moment. And then I was like, and then that's the builds up for the payoff at the end when the chief pulls it out and throws it through the window. I didn't realize how many great building blocks there were because I had watched it since I was a kid.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I think every great story has, and I'm going to use this literally and metaphorically, is intention.
Yes.
Like the stuff that's in there is in there because I want it to be, not because whoops, or I ran out of time, or this is the best I could do, or a reaction to something else. But it's like, no, I want this here.
Yeah.
And that's something that I work on with my clients all the time is reflection and intention rather than reaction.
Yeah.
Because if you live in reaction, somebody else is controlling your narrative.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So I think that this movie might be the best example of homeostasis that I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Like this hospital ward, whatever it is that we'd call it, this unit, I don't know, that's run by Nurse Ratched, it functions in a specific way that everybody knows this is how it functions.
Yeah.
And then whenever Randall comes in, he just turns it all on its head.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think, so he shows up there. He's trying to actually scheme his way into there because he thinks it's going to be easier than serving time at a typical prison.
Yeah.
And I thought about it later that he's our, as the audience, our into the story. He's our eyes and ears and our protagonist. But he's in jail, like he's in custody because of statutory rape.
Yeah. Yeah.
And fighting or something, like assault or something. It was like statutory rape and something else. I can't remember.
Five assaults, and then
yeah.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Yeah, because growing up watching it, I always thought of him as like the likable hero. I missed all that, and then during it too, he says lots of derogatory things that, and so I like it now that he's not so likable either. That he's a full character. You know, he's not all good. I just didn't notice all that when I was younger.
Yeah, I still can't believe you watched this when you were so young.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, we watched everything when I was young. We had no censoring at our house.
Yeah. Yeah. So he enters into this environment, and you see, I think it's interesting to hear you say that it's not necessarily that Ratchet is a villain. Which I don't know if villain and antagonist are always the same thing. Yeah. I think villain is like a grandiose kind of, finger pyramid, mwahahaha kind of thing, where antagonist is just the force that's pushing up against your hero.
Yep.
And so she's certainly that.
She's certainly the antagonist, yeah.
And I do think it's interesting too that you talked about kind of like her being a product of the system that existed.
Yes, yeah. So
because I'd be willing to bet that she was trained in the things that she was doing.
Yeah, and so in the past, I always thought of her as one of the great villains in all of movie history. She's so one of the great. Yeah, she's so great at being subtle. But then watching it this time and being through this field, just things of she mentions, oh Billy, she's like, I'm going to tell your mother about this, and he goes back to stuttering, and she says, well, we've been friends for a long time. Now in real life, that you wouldn't be someone's therapist and be friends with their mother. That wouldn't happen. But I was like, I could just see that it's like within that system, they're like, this is okay. People do it all the time. Just go ahead and keep doing it, and perhaps when she was younger in her training, having a difficult time with a client and someone says, oh, are you just trying to pass off your problems? You should just keep working with them. And if they don't work, if they keep being violent, then they just need a lobotomy, So in the scene where the doctors are like, it sounded like the doctors were saying he needs a higher level of care. What should we do? And it's like, it's hard for me to understand now. Was she really being evil and being like, oh, keep him on our floor. We shouldn't just pass off our problems because she wants to break him? Is she being evil, or is she really thinking she's doing the best thing for him? It's like, I wasn't sure this time watching it, her subtlety, because I don't know.
That's so interesting. I think we might have experienced this in different ways.
Yeah.
When she said to Billy, so like background for that is at some point, Randall brings two prostitutes to the floor. Sneaks them in with a bunch of liquor. The guys are having a party after hours, and one of the inmates.
I think they're patients.
Patients, yeah. One of the patients, Billy, who, by the way, is Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. I kept looking at him going, his eyes look like evil eyes. And so I went to IMDb and I was like, oh my gosh, that's why.
I had no idea. That's so funny.
Yeah, yeah. He has a stutter, is very childlike. Randall has one of the prostitutes engage Billy, and the next morning the staff comes in, they find everybody, and Billy, I think for the first time, stands up to Nurse Ratchet and does so without a stutter, without being in this kind of childlike mode. You can see his body posture is different. He's standing taller. And then when she pulls out the should I tell your mother card, I saw that as weaponizing shame.
No, she definitely was then. She was weaponizing shame then.
But I didn't see it as if maybe she actually was friends with his mother. I just saw it as she knows what cards to play to get control over this guy.
No, definitely she does. After that, she said a line where he said, well, he starts stuttering and he says, just don't tell her. And she goes, oh, Billy, you know I couldn't do that. Me and your mother have been friends for so long. Like she
Yeah.
says a cruel line like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but yeah, she's weaponizing shame. Yeah, because she's lost control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the lobotomy. So then Billy goes and or is dragged into another room and ends up taking his life
Yeah.
because he is just overcome with this shame.
Mm-hmm.
And Randall blames Ratchet for that.
Yeah.
And so he attacks her. And well, first off, I don't think it was acting when he was choking Louise Fletcher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it looked like her eyes were popping out of her head.
Yes.
That looked real.
It did.
And in doing so, they restrain him, which at this point of the story, he has already once had electroshock as punishment. And so when they lobotomize him after that, I kind of wondered, after the electroshock and then this, if these weren't interventions, but these were punitive measures. Like these were punishments.
Yeah.
And maybe they told themselves this has this effect in calming this part of the brain that's responsible for aggression and blah, blah, blah. But like, man, you're shocking a human being. And they, when they lobotomized Randall, who earlier in the story had walked into the group pretending to have been on medication or have been lobotomized. Yeah. When they did that, and you see here is the husk of a man, here is the body devoid of personality.
Yeah.
It just felt, I think the reaction that I had inside of me was just like this visceral, like, oh, that's so malicious. That's so, we're exercising our control and power over somebody.
I know, yeah.
And it just felt like not a, you know, this is a type of intervention that was used before people were really trained and understood, blah, blah, blah. It more felt like this is a weapon that we have at our disposal and we'll use it when people get so far out of line.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I wonder how many things we're doing today, especially in somewhere like, because I don't work in this at all, somewhere where there is like a intense psychiatric type ward. What kind of things they're doing today that eventually will be like, that wasn't good, you know? Like we're giving people a ton of Thorazine and they're shuffling around, or even in the world, you know, oh, we're giving people tons of SSRIs and they can't be their full authentic self. Like I wonder how many things we're going to look back on and say, wow, I can't believe we were doing that. And just things I've noticed working in an agency where things aren't questioned. It's like, well, we've always done that, you know, like on a when I ran an intensive outpatient group, when you go over the rules with the clients, I noticed right away it was like you have to dress appropriately for group, and it listed things that women should wear. That wasn't, and I said, we have to take this out. I mean, we can't have this in here. And everyone said, we've never questioned it. It's just been in there since like the 80s. And so it's just like things that just are never thought of. And I just wonder how many things are going on now that aren't the most helpful. And I just find that, I guess, the policy really interesting.
Yeah. I think having used to work in churches, tradition and we've just always done it that way was something I ran up against all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it always wakes this part of me that wants to burn it all down.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a good part.
Yeah.
It's a lot of willfulness that wakes up, but I think it is helpful no matter what system a person exists in to always have permission to be able to hold things up and re-examine them and say, is this the best way?
Yeah.
Is this something that is truly helpful for what we're trying to accomplish? Or could this be the reason that we're being held back and that we're hurting or harming people?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting to have the gift of, I don't know, being able to look back on stuff and see, Because I would imagine that maybe the staff now this is fiction, obviously, but if it was real, the staff in there could have been telling themselves, no, this is the right thing. This is state of the art. This is what we're supposed to do.
I think they would have been. I think so.
Yeah.
Which when I was younger, I thought of it as they are all just being like evil controllers or something.
Mhm.
Like they all signed up to do these jobs to be bad people. But now looking at it and being a therapist, I'm like, I think that they all think they're doing the right thing. And then like I think that Nurse Ratched, like she probably thinks she's doing the right thing, but also thinking like, well, they need structure. Things have to be my way because I'm the expert. And you know, for her in her head, I'm thinking she was thinking, well, for Billy to really heal, he really needs to not have his lisp when we bring up his mother. So it's like she's subconsciously internalizing, like, or subconsciously weaponizing shame.
Yeah.
Like if she got called out on that, I think she would be able to reason it with someone. Like if the doctor called it out.
Yeah. Like she'd be defensive and say, oh,
Yeah.
no, this is necessary because X, Y, and Z.
Yep. Oh yeah, I like how all of the characters are so, I don't know what you would call it, like so diverse or so deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Even finding out halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, that really there's only 2 or 3 people there that aren't there voluntarily.
I know. Yeah, that is great.
And the rest of them could walk out anytime they want.
Yes, and like that goes back to your homeostasis. Like they don't like it there, they complain, but they're used to it. They're used to that discomfort and the fear of living in the real world or a different world.
Yeah, it's the clinging to the familiar pain over striking out and finding the unfamiliar good.
Yes.
Which, I mean, it's scary. Like a lot of times fear can just stop you in your tracks.
Yeah.
I think so. I started flipping between the Wikipedia page of the movie and the one of the book.
Okay.
And it outlined some things that were different about Nurse Ratched's character.
Oh, okay.
And I kind of wonder, because a lot of these differences were things that, and like I said, I had known about this movie in kind of a passing pop culture way before I saw it. They were things that have kind of been in the zeitgeist about the character this whole time. So it talked about her being very passive aggressive.
Okay.
And as we've been talking, I think you've referred to it as subtle, which I think is interesting. And I think really, if I were to be watching it and somebody said at the beginning, Nurse Ratched's really passive aggressive, I would see her as that way watching the movie.
You would,
but without having that filter put over my eyes at the beginning, I think you could see it almost as strategic or subtle.
Yeah, I agree.
But it talked about after Randall attacks her and chokes her, she was gone from. Well, first off, it said in the book he also rips her shirt, exposing her breasts.
Oh, I don't remember that.
To the other. Well, it's not in the movie; it's in the book.
I mean, I don't remember that from the book. I read the book when I was the book when I was in like high school. Yeah.
Wow.
But I need to read it again. Yeah.
Yeah, but it said, and it was like an act of humiliation.
Yeah.
And it said that she was gone from the ward for a week afterwards, and when she came back, she couldn't speak. And it said this took away her primary method of control.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it doesn't show a passage of time between the attack and when she's next seen on the ward, but it shows her wearing a neck brace.
Yeah.
And I think what I read was that she was speaking with kind of a raspy kind of, but I didn't hear that as I was watching it. So it's interesting, just that little difference there. And yet I think looking back, the world kind of imagines that character as this like devious, controlling, and I was kind of reminded of, are you a fan of Harry Potter at all?
I haven't read any Harry Potter.
Okay. There's a character in book 5 and in the 5th movie as well named Dolores Umbridge who presents outwardly as like a sweet older lady who wears all pink and has pictures of cats everywhere in her office, but she is sadistic. She
Oh.
tortures the children. In one scene, she tortures Harry by having him write over and over again, "I will not tell lies," with a special quill that as he writes, it engraves it in his hand, causing scars.
Oh my gosh.
And so I kind of got that impression from
Yeah.
her. Like, I've got this outward presentation,
Mm-hmm.
but inwardly, my insides don't match my outsides, and
Yep.
I don't know. I'll have to watch it again. I can't sort out, was that something I brought into the movie because of how culture has looked back at her, or was that something that I picked up on with no filters?
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely see that about her too. Outward, you know, it's definitely like I could see she really wants control. That's her.
Order.
Yeah.
Yeah. The music is for everybody. Well, can we turn
Yeah.
it down so we can talk? No. The music is for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I remembered in the book, I remember when I read it in high school, which is so long ago, a feeling of um, after she was choked and she came back, and I guess I felt like the whole world had somehow changed. Like everyone had went on their way. They had moved on and they went on their way. So it's like for her, it's like the end of her reign as the evil queen was like over. But maybe I don't remember why I thought that. But I was like, I felt like she got what was coming to her at the end. Like she was no longer in control.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what in the book her voice being taken away was supposed to represent.
Okay.
In the
But I
movie,
feel like,
though,
not in the movie, but I feel like in the book, like people who could check out, they checked out after that or something. Like they were
Yeah.
like, okay, that was like their wake up. Maybe that was it. That was their wake up call. They were like, wow, okay, we're not under her spell anymore. She's not in control. We are going to check out and just live in the real world.
Yeah.
And just be odd people in the real world.
Yeah. and in the movie, though, like everybody was still there except Billy and except Randall. But even the chief, like all the players were still there that next scene.
Yeah, they all were. Yep.
Until the chief decides to well, here's a question, and this is just going to be speculation. So the last scene in the movie, Randall is brought back to the floor post lobotomy as a shell of himself. The chief gets up from the bed and goes to speak with him and realizes what's happened, and he, as an act of mercy, smothers him with a pillow.
Yeah.
And then picks up the control panel, sink, whatever it was.
Yeah, that water thing.
Yeah, busts the window and escapes. Do you think that the chief had escape? I know him and Randall had talked about it. But do you think he was still thinking escape before seeing Randall? Or do you think, I kind of pictured it as, my friend is no longer himself and alive. I need to be alive for him. So I kind of pictured it as a moment of inspiration.
Interesting. So he says, so they had talked about going to Canada, and he came over to his bed and he's like, Randall, okay, get up. Like, we're going to go to Canada now. I'm ready. And then he like looks and sees that he has the lobotomy scar.
Yeah.
And then but I mean, I think both of it too, like what you said too, like he's like, well, I got to do this on my own. I'm not going to just kill him and get back in bed. I gotta go and, be free. One of us has to.
Yeah. And then the last shot is him just running into the woods across a I don't know, a big yard, a big lawn.
Yeah, he's like running into the mountains. So who knows where he's going? Yeah, how he's going to get to Canada. But yeah, I think it's like such a great ending too, because it leaves you with so many feelings. You're like, oh, that's so sad that Randall had to die. But then you're like, yes, at least the chief got free.
Yeah.
And I really love the scene when it really reminds me of Therapy, when the chief first lets Randall see that he can actually talk and hear. That's great. I love that.
They're sitting on the bench and he gives him a piece of gum and the chief just says juicy fruit.
Yeah.
That's how he does it.
Yeah, it's so great.
And then Randall gives him a second piece of gum thinking that that's what got him to talk. Like, as if he could only say juicy fruit.
Yeah, I know. It's so great.
It really is. I just loved this movie. And like I said, it has this inciting hope in it. And I think that's represented by that scene at the end where the chief escapes. and is free. Because I think that, to me, so much of the movie was repression and control. I got the sense that the patients were viewed by Nurse Ratched, at least Nurse Ratched, maybe even the orderlies some, as less than human. And to me, that was best shown when, and I'm going to forget the character's name, but just before the scene where the attack happens is a scene in a group therapy session where one of the patients stands up and is kind of like just yelling at Nurse Ratched about, give me my cigarettes. I want my cigarettes. I want my cigarettes. And Randall ends up breaking a window to the office with his hand to get cigarettes to calm him down.
Yeah.
But it seems like this, I'm going to find out what it is that motivates you or loves you, and I'm going to withhold it from you to exert power over you.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, to me, the inciting hope is this spark that Randall lights in these men that is fanned fully into flame when the chief escapes.
Yes.
Like, life finds a way, to quote Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, you know?
Yeah.
And that was just such a beautiful thing to me to see that. And the moments like on the fishing boat.
Yes.
When Christopher Lloyd,
Well, I know.
holy cow.
I know, right? Yeah.
Eternally Doc Brown, but not in this movie. When he gets a fish on the line and all of them rush down to the deck to try to help him pull it in, like those kinds of moments when Randall is trying to get the chief to hold him on his shoulders, he gets somebody else to try to get the chief to slam dunk a basketball.
Yeah.
It was just like just life springing up from where it shouldn't be able to.
Yeah. It was really, sparking them to live a real life, like a life they want to live.
Yeah. I love it. Is there anything else in the movie that sticks out to you that you want to talk about?
I thought it when I was watching it, I thought it was interesting that the way that they cast it, that they had the orderlies be 3 black men. I didn't remember that in the book, or when I was younger, I didn't notice that. I wondered why that decision was made.
I wondered that, yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, but I thought that was interesting. And when I was younger too, I thought that those girls were just his friends. I didn't realize that those were sex workers. And then at first I was kind of like, watching that, I was like, that doesn't make him seem that great. And then I was like, you know what? That is great. He's like helping sex workers. Like, that's an okay job to have. And he gave them money, and like, that is fine. I was like, so,
I kind of wondered if not so much that he was helping the sex workers as if he was just trying to help his friends.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
Well,
but they
the
got
first
paid,
time,
and
the first time that he breaks out, which by the way was much easier than I think it should have been.
Oh, I know,
he
right?
just gets the chief to lift him up, and he gets on top of the fence and grabs onto a tree branch and just drops over the fence and gets he acts as the driver of the school bus that takes them on the fishing journey. But like, when he gets all of the patients in the bus, he just pulls over at a bar, I think, and that's where he gets Cindy, I think was the first one's name.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but the first one, that's where he finds her. He just goes in, and then he comes out a few minutes later with her. Hey guys, this is this is my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's interesting to have these spots of life in a story that you don't expect them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really interesting to hear about your experiences watching this at different points in your life.
Yeah.
And picking up on stuff that you didn't pick up on.
Yeah. No, it's funny. And there is something in popular culture too, where they're like the chief is like just his hallucination, but I don't remember. Have you heard of that?
No.
So I don't know if that's a speculation from the book or if the book leaves that up for interpretation. But when I was watching it, I was like, wait, when is the chief supposed to be his hallucination? But that is something that I've heard, is that the chief is really just Randall's hallucinations.
Oh, so then if that's the case, let's run with it. If that's the case, what does the chief's escape symbolize at the end?
I think it would be that he escaped. The only escape Randall had was through death. The only way he could be free was through death. Like maybe, I don't know. Maybe he died
Oh,
after the
that's
lobotomy.
interesting.
Yeah.
Is there any reference by other characters that the chief was there before Randall got there?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, now I got to watch it a second time thinking
Yeah,
about it that
right.
way.
Yeah, if you see him before Randall gets there.
Oh, I like that. I like
Or was
that.
he ever in the room without Randall there? Because there are a lot of shots where he reacts to what Randall is doing, but is he ever
Yeah.
there when Randall's not there? Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that's an interesting thing too.
I do think a character says that the chief is deaf and dumb.
That's true. Yep. You're right. That does. Yeah. Right when Randall gets there, so they do see him. So.
But I think that character says that to Randall.
Mm-hmm.
So that could also be in his head.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to look into that more, where that came from, if that's like a real thing,
yeah.
or if that's just what people speculated later on.
Yeah. Also, I feel like that would challenge the notion that a lot of the doctors and I guess administrators are saying in the movie that no, Randall does not have any kind of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's true.
Huh. Yeah. Wow. Do you think that this movie will ever get remade?
I don't know. That'd be really interesting if it did, but I mean, it's still so great. It doesn't really
Yeah.
need to be remade because it's still, I think, like you said, someone younger now who gets bored in movies that are slower, I think it still has enough pacing to keep it going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd love to see a stage production of it. I know I've heard of stage productions, but I've never been able to go to one. But I'd love to see one on the stage of it.
Yeah, the Wikipedia said that Kirk Douglas starred in the Broadway production of it.
Okay, yeah.
And that he bought the rights to it to make into a movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it said he tried for, I don't know how many years he tried, but he couldn't get it off the ground. So he sold the rights to his son, Michael Douglas,
Mm-hmm.
who was able to get it made into a movie. And that's how Danny DeVito ended up in it, because he was best friends with Michael Douglas.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
It's so great, yeah.
Yeah, I would be afraid if this was remade. I mean, I feel like Hollywood, there's like certain movies they remake all the time, over and over. I don't know if I've ever thought a remake was as good as the original.
Yeah, I mean, I went and saw A Star Is Born, and I always just loved the original. So every single thing, I was like, nope, the original did it better.
Which original? Which of the two originals?
Sorry, not the original. The 70s with Barbara Streisand. Not the original. I mean, I think there was two more. Yeah, with Chris Christopherson and Barbara Streisand. I mean, that to me is that would be one. If someone said I want to remake this, I'd say why. They did it the best they could with Barbara Streisand and Chris Christopherson. And then when I watched it, it was just so hard not to compare it to what I was used to.
Yeah, I think another thing that I was just so struck by in this movie was Jack Nicholson.
So good, right?
Because he was 38 when this was made, and I'm 39 right now, and to me, Jack Nicholson has always been Jack Nicholson. Like, I think the first thing I saw him in was '89 Batman.
Yep, me too.
And he was so Jack Nicholson as the Joker that I grew up just thinking, well, that guy doesn't play characters. He plays himself.
Yeah.
He just says the lines of a character. But in this, it's like, I don't know, he turned himself up to 11, and he did embody, I don't know, was maybe the character, you'd have to say this, is the character in the book so like he was in the movie? Because I feel like in the movie it was as if Nicholson was still in it, but he embodied this other thing too.
Yeah. I feel like the character was, if I remember right, I feel like it was a lot like how he acted in the movie.
Man.
But I saw the movie before I read the book, so you always, when you see a movie first, you just think of that person in it. But there is a movie. Okay, what is this movie? And it's about hypnotism, and it's a musical, and it has Barbara Streisand, and Jack Nicholson was in that. Do you know what movie I'm talking about? It's like I Can See Clearly or something.
No.
It's like I Can See on a Clear Day, and there's a therapist's office and I think Jack Nicholson, he's young. It's older than this movie, and he's like maybe her boyfriend or something. but she goes to a therapist's office and he does past life regressions with her, and then she jumps into past lives. It's a famous Barbara Streisand movie.
Oh.
But the therapist's office is an amazing therapist's office. It's so cool. Like, it's decorated so cool. Like, I wish that could be my office. It's like giant and it's like white shag carpeting. It's great, but I don't know. But Jack Nicholson was great in that movie too, because I remember watching that and being like, wow, he's young and he's in that character, and he's not playing.
Is it On a Clear Day You Can See Forever?
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's interesting talking with therapists about movies, how we zone in and stuff like that. Like the episode that I did on Marriage Story with Dr. Terry Murphy. One of the first things, she was watching it, I want to say a day or two before we did the episode, and she texted me while she was watching it. I bet that therapist's office costs $3,500 a month.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's funny.
It's so I wonder if you can tell me something that your clients have taught you.
Yeah. Gosh, my clients, for me, have taught me just a different way of like looking at the world. I mean, everyone views the world so differently. So I think that's the main thing, and a lot about resilience, especially during this pandemic time. When it first started, I was so afraid in the beginning, and I was so like, oh my gosh, we're all going to end up like in the stand. People are going to be like looting stores. We're going to have nothing. And I was like, I'm going to have to garden and catch my own rainwater. I was freaking out. But then I was standing over my children, watching them breathe, thinking they had COVID, videotaping them breathe. I was freaking out in the beginning. March, I was watching the mayor's things every day, just afraid, and then I'm doing Zoom sessions with my clients, pretending I'm normal. And it really helped me. It really helped me hearing everyone's takes on it. And, one of my clients said, the good thing is the earth is healing, and that really makes me feel good. And that was something I could hold on to. And I think that happens a lot, just hearing their own processes. Like, it gives me a lot of hope hearing my clients and going through their process, and what they hold on to. So I think that's the main thing that I can think of that I really learned from them. I also learned a lot of other books to read or techniques to use or things that they heard in meetings where they felt a connection. I learned a lot from all of that, and they'll say things and then I'll think, okay, I'm going to use that with a different client.
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that. Yeah, I learned that too.
Nice. Tell me, so I think it's so interesting that you said you were freaking out, but with clients you were pretending to be normal.
Yes.
Yes. I think sometimes we do have to flex that muscle. Tell me something that you're doing to take care of yourself.
Oh, well, I try to just live a life that's not super stressful, but like every morning I like to, when my kids wake up, and I have very wild children. I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, an almost 2-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy. And they like to, first thing in the morning, rip off all the couch cushions and jump up and down to Ghostbusters. So I let them do that. And then I go outside.
They sound perfect.
Yeah, they listen to the Ghostbusters theme song. It's crazy. And I just go outside, and in my backyard, I look out at the trees and I drink my coffee, and I can kind of hear them going nuts, not nuts. They're just having fun in the house. And that's one thing I start my day. And I really, I like doing yoga. I like doing exercise. If I go a few days without doing something with my body, I really notice that I'm a little more edgy. Making films, doing something creative, writing, joining different writing groups, and then talking to my girlfriends on the phone. Those are all things I do.
Yeah. I think I love hearing you say kind of exercising your creative muscle. Just because that's such a big part of me, of what I do for self-care as well. Like if I go a significant amount of time without making something, it feels like I'm less of me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be the same kind of thing. Like, I don't always have to make visual art or make a movie or whatever. Like, I at one point I was building shelves in my garage. And that was something that I would go down in the garage and spend an hour on every day for like a week and a half. And I loved it. And it was almost a mindfulness exercise, because it was like I set my mind to the task. And if I needed to look up, instructions or tips or whatever. I did that at the beginning, but then I just started and I kept going, and I love it. And so flexing the creative muscle is a big part of my self-care as well.
Yeah.
It works something out.
Yeah.
So let's say that somebody was listening to our conversation today and they just think, oh my gosh, I just feel like I connect with her so well. How could they become your client?
They can call me at 310-266-5044, or they can email me at missyprusinski@gmail.com. They can find me on Psychology Today. And
nice. And you got a website too, right?
I have a website too. Yeah, prusinskitherapy.com. You can look on there.
Very cool. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to let the people know about?
No, I think we covered it all.
We mentioned your film is on Vimeo. They can search for it there. Queer and Southern God.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, and just anyone can give me a call and I can talk to them about therapy and what it looks like and answer any questions.
And hypnotherapy.
And hypnotherapy too. If someone just wants to come in for hypnotherapy, we can do that too.
Very cool. Missy, thank you so much for coming on today. You're just my favorite new person to talk to. I can't even believe it.
I know. We have to meet up sometime.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining me this week in the theater. I'll make sure I save a seat for you and a friend next week. Let's raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.